Hello, everybody. My name is Juan. I'm here today with Paul McLeod. We are going to talk about a particular case study that they've been working on. I'll let you go through the details in a second, Paul. And the intention is basically to educate a little bit our clients and our potential new clients about the possibilities of data management, and data integration. So with that said, I'm going to pass the ball to Paul. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Juan. Nice to see you again.
So the idea is you have this specific case that you've been trying to we've been back and forth on that one. And you wanted to focus on a specific company that works in a specific industry. So why don't you walk us through that specific company? Obviously, for legal reasons, we cannot name them, and that's absolutely fine. But we can basically paint a picture about that specific company, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Let's start with that. Mm-hmm.
So this is a local reinsurance company. In Bermuda, we have a very robust international reinsurance market where the companies here are working with companies around the world, providing very high level catastrophe cover, and different types of reinsurance products to insurance companies globally. This company was very new. We're operating about 2 years, growing very fast, both from a standpoint of how much business they were writing, how successful they'd be in the market, but also how many people they were bringing on board. And so what they were finding is, and they decided to be a completely cloud-based company from an infrastructure standpoint right at the outset, so they wouldn't have any legacy technology behind. So quite a forward-thinking, advanced, fast-moving organization. But what they were finding was, as they're getting their underwriting teams together, their actuarial teams together, the finance teams together, they were needing to get various back office systems to support those operations. Reinsurance is a finance industry that is very heavily regulated, lots of requirements for them to report and record information with very robust audit trails. And so they quickly looked to say, let's bring in the different types of solutions that we need for our different user groups. So the actuarial team, they picked a solution. The finance team picked a solution. The underwriting team picked a solution. The claims handling team picked a solution. And in their mind, they were best of breed. And quite often, they were SaaS-based solutions. So they were sitting out in the cloud somewhere. There were some on-premise. The finance team picked an on-premise solution. And so there was quite a cornucopia of systems out there, which they put in place, and we're serving them well for what they wanted to do. But then, of course, that causes challenges in other areas.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, what were the main challenges that they found using that specific setup, which is fairly common when you're starting as a company? We all know that you use SaaS because it's the easy way. But what were the main challenges? What were the top 3 things that they identified as this is really painful? Yeah.
So this really it fell into a few different areas. The one was, they have some very expensive resources, actuarial teams, senior underwriters, CFOs and CFAs, and they were having to spend an awful lot of time themselves downloading data from these SaaS-based solutions and doing their own combination of that data and data cleansing and adding business rules. So that in itself was problematic. It's hampering these highly paid, very top-end resources' ability to be able to do the work they needed to do. So rather than making the decisions, they're spending a lot of time just collecting the data. On the other side of things, there was a lot of consistency issues within the organization. So you might have the actuarial team, the underwriting team, and the finance team, and they're all looking at something like perhaps premium. And every single one of them is coming back with a different number. And whether that number was correct or not would be debated. And it was very hard for anybody to say, for sure, mine is correct. And there's reasons for that. Maybe it was because the spreadsheet or the data was downloaded 2 days ago and somebody else downloaded it today. So there's one person has some stale data. It might be that they were combining the data in their own particular way to suit their specific reporting needs. Maybe the actuarial team were really, really interested in kind of coming up with a true net premium number, including all their potential reserves and exposures. And that front, maybe the finance team looking at things more from a gross written perspective. On the underwriting team, we're looking at it maybe on their kind of net of commission basis to see what they were bringing into the business. But ultimately, there was no centralized space for them to be able to say this is the information. And the other thing as well is that some of these SaaS-based solutions are very technically complex to connect to. So some of the data was just not even available to some of the end users. So they might want to be able to access information about maybe something that's going on in the underwriting system or something in the actuarial pricing system. But if they didn't happen to be technically adept to be able to connect to a REST API, say, and download some information and then put it somewhere else, they just basically wouldn't have access to that data, would have to ask somebody else to do that for them. So the whole access and manipulation and the use of the data was an issue there. And then the final thing really is the governance and compliance aspect of it that was really, really warring the operations team.
Right.
Reinsurance, as I said, it's a finance industry. They're very, very heavily regulated. They have a lot of reporting they have to do, a lot of audits they have to go through to show compliance, reporting to regulatory bodies in Bermuda about their financial positions and their operations, and having this very disparate, disconnected, unstable data environment was really causing a lot of concerns for them.
All right. So can I ask you, in terms of the data integration, you mentioned probably Excel sheets. Was there any other type of procedure that was less manual? Were they using any kind of patch of tools, if you like, in order to integrate that data, regardless of the manual input?
Oh, there was multiple ways it was being done. That was part of the problem too. So if somebody happened to know SQL or Python, they were extracting the data and dumping it in a database themselves that they had access to and doing stuff to.
Okay.
Others were using Power BI and using the Power BI data sets to combine Excel spreadsheets that they downloaded themselves and got from somebody else. Some were just doing it all in Excel and just copying and pasting data and writing formulas. So that was part of the challenge, is that there was no consistent platform and no consistent approach. Very difficult to govern that kind of environment.
Of course. And do you feel that that's kind of common in reinsurance companies, or is that the exception to the rule?
I would say that's absolutely common. And I would say common across most finance companies, because they're driven by the numbers. And, all these knowledge workers that are out there, whether you're a bank, whether you're a reinsurance company, whether you're an investment company, at the end of the day, the people who are making decisions need to be able to pull data and combine it and do something with it to be able to make the decisions on how to move forward. You can't do that by gut feel. You've got to look at the numbers and come up with a rationalized, reasoned decision. And what will happen is, if that stuff is not readily available, they will figure a way to do it themselves, because they, So it's quite common.
All right. Just a last question about that status quo. So do you know more or less what was the impact on the business operations? So whether it was time, effort, what was their key pain point, regardless of their business impact?
It varied based on the user group. So on the actual end users who were consuming the data, their frustration and pain point was all about how difficult it was for them to get the data and how long it took for them. So right. Basically their reduction in capacity to be able to do the work they need to do. But then on the kind of operations side, the part of the company they're concerned about, how they're doing from an audit perspective. They were seriously worried about the inconsistencies of the data that they had across the environment and how unstable it was. And you lose a person, somebody gets poached somewhere, and all of a sudden a data reporting stream that you used to have is gone, and nobody knows how to recreate it, and you're starting from scratch. So, instability, kind of exposure from an audit and a compliance perspective. So those two areas, it was equally painful, I think, organization wide, but focus on a different group. Yeah.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about how they engage with you, how they engage with Bespoke Analytics, or was it Kevin that first reached out? What was the kind of the engagement process, if you like?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've worked in this industry in Bermuda for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was some awareness of our operations in Bermuda and what we did. And both Kevin and I knew the person who was actually head of the operations group. And he reached out to us and said, "These are the challenges we're having. Is this the kind of stuff that you guys work with?" And we were like, "Oh, all the time." And we're doing that all the time. So, we obviously are looking out for these kind of organizations to see how we can go in and help them. But, they came out and said, "We've got some real pain. We have to do something about this." And so we
Mm-hmm.
went in and we had a look at what they were doing, looked at the various ways. They were a little unique in the fact that we hadn't dealt with a company that was 100% basically cloud-based before. I mean, we've worked with
Okay.
companies that use various types of systems on-premise and cloud and stuff before, but never one that was 100% cloud-based before. So we did quite a bit of time looking at, what the options were, what type of systems they were connecting to, how complex the data was in those systems, how readily available the data was, the different endpoints that are available. Some used REST, some were, as I said, were on-premise, and some were using Draft GL.
Mm-hmm.
So quite a mix of technologies. Um, and then we also went and looked at the various types of things that the different users are trying to do with their data so that we could get a comprehensive view of what the organization as a whole was trying to achieve in this data exercise. And then from there, we basically made a proposal and said, this is the way we think you guys should go forward. And this is how we can help you in that. I guess it's worth noting as well that, and it's not untypical or atypical, that where they were in their particular life cycle, they didn't really have any any deep expertise or resources in this particular space
Got it.
in kind of creating a data estate or integration. So they didn't have anybody internally who had a sense of how they could go forward. They just knew that it was painful and they needed to do something about it. So we
Mm-hmm.
were able to come in and say, "Yep, seen this kind of thing before. Understand what your users are trying to do. Got a good sense of the data and the sources that you've got here. This is how we think you can put forward, a data environment that will meet the needs of your users, be consistent, and also meet your compliance and regulatory needs."
Okay. Interesting. So, in terms of your proposal, first of all, could you define what the proposal was?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of technologies and what kind of stages, I suppose, for the implementation was going to
Yeah,
be? And secondly, how it was received. I think it's important because typically when we talk to clients, there is always a little bit of back and forth, reluctancy when you see a price. So just to understand a little bit what was the
absolutely.
conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one thing we didn't want to do is we didn't want to take an approach that was not going to align with their cloud-based strategic objectives on a technology platform perspective. So, at the outset, we recommended that they basically that the data tools in the data estate should live in the cloud. They had an Azure tenant, and so that's perfect. There's plenty of wonderful tools to work with there. Another piece, though, from our perspective, is automation is key in these kind of projects.
Mm.
And there's multiple ways that you can build these data warehouses, these data estates, multiple tool sets you can use. But really what you want to focus on is you want to focus on the solutions that are required and less on the kind of plumbing and nuts and bolts of getting that data together. So what we decided to do was use an automation tool called Time Extender,
Mm-hmm.
which allows you to deploy and consume data from multiple sources, whether it's on-premise, cloud-based, whatever, spreadsheets, but also to deploy to multiple database technologies, whether it's an on-premise SQL Server, Snowflake, Azure, the Gen 2 data lake, even Fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that tool was going to allow us to build the solution quickly, Azure is going to provide the data platform already embedded within their tenant, just an extension of the license they already got. And that was going to provide a centralized location for them to upload their data into a centralized data lake and then be able to leverage it through creating data sets that were useful to the different user groups, but all driven from the same centralized reconciled data. When we gave that proposal, there was two different types of reactions, really. The first reaction was it was relief. It's like, when we laid it out, they're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because sometimes these things are difficult to, when you look at them, you don't know where to start. How do I, these 5 sources, how do I start bringing them together? What do I do first? And so we were able to lay out a roadmap for them to say, this is how you start. Put the infrastructure in place, prioritize your data sources, ingest them one at a time, start giving value as soon as possible back to your end users, and continue in an iterative way in that path. So you're not waiting years to get results, you're getting results almost immediately. But we also did get pushback, which is not uncommon. We're change agents. We're always about change. People like to kind of do things the way they do, especially if they're in a scenario where they've been crafting their own kind of reporting environment manually. They get very nervous about whether or not, losing that, because they know everything there, even if nobody else does,
Right.
And so there was some work to do from an educational perspective, to assure them that, that's going to be included. You will be able to reconcile and sign off on these numbers and see the data lineage and the business rules that are being applied to them. And that's all going to be surfaced. I mean, that's part of the automation as well, the timing center, which is great, is a document process. So it becomes very, very easy to maintain. And so there was some pushback from some of the end users initially. But what we did with that was like, well, that's natural. We didn't get upset. That's what takes place, and over time we just kept engaging them in the process so that, we could get their feedback and information about what was important, what they needed to include in that, but also they could see the data coming together and start getting a comfort level and understanding of how this was better and how this was going to make their lives better. So rather than them being concerned, which is the big thing, is you're going to take away my source of data and I don't know what I'm going to get in return and I won't be able to do my job. It's like, okay, I get it. You're going to take away this pain that I've got every week, every month, every quarter, and you're going to give me the same information and more, and I can rely on it 100%. So that took some time, but that's a normal part of the process.
Change management, yeah, absolutely. So once they kind of fine-tune your proposal and accepted the fact that that was the way to go, could you speak about the process of implementation? So kind of what were the stages and how long did it take basically to take them from a very messy, for lack of a better word, situation to data state that is consolidated, is automated, and it gives insights basically?
So the first thing we had to do once we got approval and sign off was you need to put the platform in place. You need to be able to say, okay, I've got my data repositories, got my data lake where I'm landing all the data that we're bringing in from everywhere. We just bring it in, don't think about cleaning it, just as it is. And then your data warehouse and your for creating that curated and cleansed and embellished data set for analysis, and then semantic layers, the kind of SSAS semantic models that allow, the tabular models that allow end users easy access to the data through multiple tools without having to have expertise in writing complex query languages. The first step was to get the platform in place and install timing center. Everything's ready to go. So once that's in place, everything's bedded in, the operations team understand how it works. We've got an environment which is controlled and running. Then it was a question of prioritizing the data sources that would be most useful first. And so we decided, seeing as kind of from a reinsurance perspective, everything really starts with the underwriting journey. So the underwriting is them. That's they're going out and they're selling their reinsurance contract. Everything else falls from that. So the actuary get involved as part of the underwriting process to price and assess the risk of a new kind of reinsurance contracts being negotiated by the underwriting team. The finance team, come in after the fact to record all the information that comes out of that binding of that reinsurance contract and the flow of funds back and forth and everything. So everything really starts with the underwriting. So we decided we'd start with the underwriting, source systems first, and bring those in, and then use those to create this centralized, essentially, the scaffolding, the main model of how the data is going to hold together, and then everything else basically comes and hangs off of that. So you've got your reinsurance contract. That's great. You can hang off that all the actuarial analysis that was done with it, the loss triangles that were generated, the pricing information that was done. You can hang all the financial analysis that comes off of it, what your earnings are, what your IBNR is, what your estimated income, what your actuals were, and so that was a good place to start. The other thing we did as well is they had some very, very immediate reporting needs that they needed to tackle, which they couldn't get to, and they were a bit concerned about some of the delay it might take to transform the data to create a centralized model. And so we took a hybrid approach in that regard. So the first thing you do is we ingested the underwriting data raw as it was into the data lake, and then we presented that to them to be able to do an initial reporting exercise so they could satisfy some immediate pain point reporting needs that they needed to get out the door right away. But then basically once we built out the kind of more, the more curated model, we'll then migrate those reports to that model. So,
right.
Just the whole time we're looking at this, as we're going through this process, let's make sure that wherever we can, we're adding value back to the end users as quickly as possible. So there's a continual kind of return on investment model in how this goes, rather than, wait, another 18 months and we'll be there. And after that, we then just prioritize the business needs, basically amongst the business. We kind of created a steering committee so they could prioritize what was most important for the next stage in their data journey, and then just bring that next set in and integrate it into the combined model. I guess from a timing perspective, we got the infrastructure up in a couple of weeks. That doesn't take very long to set up.
Okay.
It's pretty quick to set up. And then I guess within 3 months, we had the first underwriting data ingested, and then we were working on the finance system. We had to pause that because things happen all the time. They decided midstream to redo the entire finance system.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That might affect the process. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to put that one on hold, but that was fine. We just switched over and brought in the actuarial information for them, and to start bringing that in, and then started looking at some of their underlying data. So it's still ongoing, but it's been very successful.
All right. So I question that I actually failed to ask: did you do kind of a POC prior to the launch of the full operation, or
yes, we did.
So what was okay? And what was the aha moment? Like, oh, I get it. This is gonna work.
Yeah. Now we always try and do a POC because these type of solutions do take some investment. It's an investment well worth making. You end up creating an asset for the organization. This is not an expense. It's an investment. And so to make sure that everybody understands the scope of the technology and the solution, the capability, we do a POC. We try and do one in 5 days. So we'll install the entire data suite, and we'll pick a data source, and we'll pull it in, and we'll do some transformations, and we'll produce reports for them in a 5-day period in their environment so they can see what it's like. So the aha moment really was on a few different levels. The first was, wow, that was actually really quick and easy to do. They were quite amazed at that. And if you use the right tools, it can be quite quick. And the other was just how easy it was then for them to leverage the data afterwards. And the final was when they looked at the solution themselves to say, how do we manage this ourselves? They were surprised at how how well laid out the various technologies were, how easy it was for them to monitor, how the environment was, its health, the builds happened last, and what to do, and also the documentation, and it ticked all the audit boxes and everything. It was, yeah. So once they
Right.
saw it in place, they're like, you did all that in 5 days. It's like, yeah,
Wow.
and we
That's amazing.
spent time writing up a presentation to give to you about what we did in 5 days. And,
That's
so
fair enough.
yeah, so that was the big aha moment, because they looked and said, yeah, it can be done. Yeah, it solves our problems quickly, and I can touch and feel this technology, and it's great. And the other thing that was great as well is that we were able to move forward with that solution. So it wasn't we do the POC, okay, now we start again. We just basically said, okay, all we have to do is upscale some of the back
Yeah.
end infrastructure, and we just continue with what we've been doing.
Yeah.
What we've just done in the POC is not a throwaway. You can think of that as a foundation for what you're doing going forward.
Exactly. That's the alpha version of the solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So in terms of, so we went through the journey from the very moment that they engage with you to the moment of back and forth of this is the solution, implementation, they are happy with the POC, they move forward. What are the perception that they have right now, obviously, and I think one key point is that the fact that they can manage the technology themselves. So you're empowering them with solutions that they can manage by themselves. I think that's an excellent point. But what do you think, or what do you feel, or what do you know about their interpretation of the ROI? And obviously, you have touched base in many of the components right now. But if you wanted to kind of summarize in 2 or 3 points, what would they be?
Well, I mean, going back to the original pain points, the perceptions on the end users. One is I'm losing time in putting this in my workday by putting the data together, and the other is I'm terrified of the exposure we have from a compliance and a regulatory perspective. Both of those were addressed. So they're saving. I mean, across the organization, they must be saving person weeks every month. On the data assembly, because there were so many organizations there, multiple people in the finance, multiple people in the actuarial, multiple people in the underwriting, multiple people in the claims side of things, all doing their own, data extraction preparation. So now they've saved a bunch of effort on that side that can be applied to actually doing the true job they need to do, which is doing actuarial pricing, reserving, or looking at the underlying structure of a contract to figure out how you want to structure this from an underwriting perspective, or being able to report the finance numbers back to the shareholders of the board, or in their annual or quarterly statements, kind of thing. So they're able to get to the work that they needed to do, and from a governance and compliance perspective, it's just tick 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 tick. So like, got that. Don't have to worry about these anymore. Audit's going to be great. So saving a massive amount of time, and therefore cost, multiple person weeks on a month, I would estimate. And then being able to actually meet those audit and governance and compliance requirements that they have to have. So both of those are massive, massive wins for them.
Yeah, and also allowing professionals to do their job in an innovative way, because you will have time to think rather than to crunch numbers in any case.
The thing is they now actually have access to data they couldn't get to before. So not only is it making it easier for them to do what they were doing, they actually now have more data that they were having a hard time getting hold of. I mean, that was one thing that was interesting as well, is that from a difficulty perspective, some of the challenges we faced in this was that when you start stepping into the software as a service world, that SaaS world, where these companies are providing solutions on the web, everybody does it different. And there's very little commonality insofar as how people present data to you, apart from we're going to use a REST API. But whether or not it's a complete set of data, whether or not the data is consistent, all depends on how they decide to code it in the back end. So I guess really from us, the biggest technical challenge was just navigating through that, especially because some of the tools were quite new, So the tools themselves they'd only been operating for a couple of years, and so they were still working out some of the kinks. And so, we were able to combine two things. One, which is our ability and our understanding in that technical space to be able to do those connections and exercise and pull back those, that data through REST APIs. But the other was also from a business vertical perspective, understanding reinsurance and insurance data and saying, hey, we need to have some sort of information about where's the participant details on this underwriting structure. Oh, we haven't done this yet. Okay, that's kind of really important. We need to have that. Or how are we going to get the IBNR and the and the kind of your earned values both on actuals and estimates from the finance system, and being able to not just say, okay, I connect to it, but actually having some insight as to what kind of information we need to bring back so we can shortcut that process for the clients.
Fantastic. So I suppose my last question, probably my last question, because I ask a lot of them, is, after all the setup, everything is working as intended. Obviously, you keep that relationship with your client. What are the technologies or the plans that they have to continue improving their own data, if they have any? Have you had that conversation with them?
They're still growing very, very rapidly.
Uh-huh. So
the company now, I think, we've been working with them for about, 18 months in total. The company now is more than twice as big as it was when we started.
Wow.
They're growing very, very quickly. And they're bringing on new systems all the time. And kind of the role we've fallen into with them and it's the way that we like to work with our clients, it's a real partnered relationship, because we bring some expertise to the table that is, quite frankly, sometimes hard to source internally. And so, so we work very closely with them, even when they're looking at things and helping to strategize what they want to do with different data sources and how to make use of that, or what they want to do from a platform perspective. I mean, as an interesting example, their actuarial team were wanting to start ingesting some very, very large underlying pricing data that they were using. Reinsurance is interesting. You're insuring an insurance company that will have and some of them have a lot, like thousands and thousands of insurance policies themselves that you're writing insurance over. And so quite often what the actuaries like to do is look at all the data from those underlying policies to try and see trends or things that they might need to be concerned about. Maybe they're located in risky areas. Maybe some of the organizations are not kind of, rated the way they'd like them to be, stuff like that. It can be massive amounts of data. And so they're looking at, okay, how can we bring this in? How can we make use of this ourselves? And we've been exploring ways that they can make use of things like Fabric, because of the way that it can reduce the storage requirements, because you store it one place and then have a series of tools that those more advanced data and analysts, users can use on top of that information. So, we're helping them in the journey going forward. We're also training their people up to become more effective, data engineers in this space. So, yeah,
right.
Yeah,
fantastic.
So they're still charging forward.
Plenty of things to do. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I think that covers most of what I wanted to ask you. Paul, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I learn a few things every time. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, and I hope to see you soon.
Oh, thank you.
Last thing is, do you have anything to say to any other reinsurance companies? What will be your, call to action, if you like?
I guess the call to action is, and it's an interesting one, is, I know that they struggle with this information. A lot of them do. And we're here in Bermuda. We're available. We're knowledgeable and skilled resources that can help them. Reach out and give us a call. Let us come in and have a look, and we can talk quite openly about what we can and can't do to help you in your data journey.
Have a coffee. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Ciao, ciao.